123,000 people have been safely flown out of Afghanistan. That includes about 6,000 American citizens. This has been a massive military, diplomatic, and humanitarian undertaking, one of the most difficult in our nation's history, and an extraordinary feat of logistics and coordination under some of the most challenging circumstances imaginable. Many, many people made this possible. I want to commend our outstanding diplomats who worked around the clock and around the world to coordinate the operation. They volunteered for duty at the Kabul airport. They flew to transit countries to help process thousands of Afghans bound for the United States. They deployed to ports of entry and American military bases to welcome Afghans to their new homes. They staffed a 24/7 task force here in Washington, overseen by Deputy Secretary Brian McKeon. And they built a list of Americans possibly seeking to leave Afghanistan, then worked to contact every single one of them repeatedly, making 55,000 phone calls, sending 33,000 emails since August 14th. They solved problem after problem to keep the mission moving forward. They did this because for the thousands of State Department and USAID employees who've served in Afghanistan in the past 20 years, this evacuation operation was very personal. Many worked hand in hand for years with Afghan partners, many of whom became trusted friends. We also lost cherished members of our foreign service community in Afghanistan. We'll never forget them. Helping Americans, our foreign partners who've been by our side for 20 years, and Afghans at risk at this critical moment was more than just a high-stakes assignment for our team. It was a sacred duty. And the world saw how our diplomats rose to the challenge with determination and heart. U.S. service members in Kabul did heroic work, securing the airport, protecting civilians of many nationalities, including tens of thousands of Afghans, and airlifting them out. They're also providing vital support right now, caring for Afghans on military bases in Europe, the Middle East, and here in the United States. We've seen pictures of U.S. service members at the Kabul airport cradling babies, comforting families. That's the kind of compassionate courage our men and women in uniform exemplify. They carried out this mission under the constant threat of terrorist violence. And 4 days ago, 11 Marines, 1 Navy medic, and 1 soldier were killed by a suicide bomber at the airport gate, as well as scores of Afghans. Nearly all of them were in their early 20s, just babies or toddlers on September 11th, 2001. These deaths are a devastating loss for our country. We at the State Department feel them deeply. We have a special bond with the Marines. The first person that you see when you visit an American embassy is a Marine. They guard our diplomatic missions. They keep us safe around the world. We couldn't do our jobs without them. And we will never forget their sacrifice, nor will we forget what they achieved. The most exceptional among us perform a lifetime's work of service in a short time here on earth. So it was for our exceptional brothers and sisters who died last week. Finally, I want to thank our allies and partners. This operation was a global endeavor in every way. Many countries stepped up with robust contributions to the airlift, including working by our side at the airport. Some are now serving as transit countries, allowing evacuees to be registered and processed on the way to their final destinations. Others have agreed to resettle Afghan refugees permanently, and we hope more will do so in the days and weeks ahead. We're truly grateful for their support. Now, U.S. military flights have ended, and our troops have departed Afghanistan. A new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan has begun. It's one in which we will lead with our diplomacy. The military mission is over. A new diplomatic mission has begun. So here's our plan for the days and weeks ahead. First, we built a new team to help lead this new mission. As of today, we've suspended our diplomatic presence in Kabul and transferred our operations to Doha, Qatar, which will soon be formally notified to Congress. Given the uncertain security environment and political situation in Afghanistan, it was the prudent step to take. And let me take this opportunity to thank our outstanding Chargé d'Affaires in Kabul, Ambassador Ross Wilson, who came out of retirement in January 2020 to lead our embassy in Afghanistan and has done exceptional, courageous work during a highly challenging time. For the time being, we will use this post in Doha to manage our diplomacy with Afghanistan, including consular affairs, administering humanitarian assistance, and working with allies, partners, and regional and international stakeholders to coordinate our engagement and messaging to the Taliban. Our team there will be led by Ian McCarry, who served as our Deputy Chief of Mission in Afghanistan for this past year. No one's better prepared to do the job. Second, we will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose. Let me talk briefly about the Americans who remain in Afghanistan. We made extraordinary efforts to give Americans every opportunity to depart the country, in many cases talking and sometimes walking them into the airport. Of those who self-identified as Americans in Afghanistan who are considering leaving the country, we've thus far received confirmation that about 6,000 have been evacuated or otherwise departed. This number will likely continue to grow as our outreach and arrivals continue. We believe there are still a small number of Americans, under 200 and likely closer to 100, who remain in Afghanistan and want to leave. We're trying to determine exactly how many. We're going through manifests and calling and texting through our lists, and we'll have more details to share as soon as possible. Part of the challenge with fixing a precise number is that there are longtime residents of Afghanistan who have American passports and who are trying to determine whether or not they wanted to leave. Many are dual citizen Americans with deep roots and extended families in Afghanistan who've resided there for many years. For many, it's a painful choice. Our commitment to them and to all Americans in Afghanistan and everywhere in the world continues. The protection and welfare of Americans abroad remains the State Department's most vital and enduring mission. If an American in Afghanistan tells us that they want to stay for now, and then in a week or a month or a year, they reach out and say, "I've changed my mind," we will help them leave. Additionally, we've worked intensely to evacuate and relocate Afghans who worked alongside us and are at particular risk of reprisal. We've gotten many out, but many are still there. We will keep working to help them. Our commitment to them has no deadline. Third, we will hold the Taliban to its pledge to let people freely depart Afghanistan. The Taliban is committed to let anyone with proper documents leave the country in a safe and orderly manner. They've said this privately and publicly many times. On Friday, a senior Taliban official said it again on television and radio, and I quote, "Any Afghans may leave the country, including those who work for Americans, if they want that the Taliban let people travel outside Afghanistan freely." As of today, more than 100 countries have said that they expect the Taliban to honor travel authorizations by our countries. And just a few short hours ago, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution that enshrines that responsibility, laying the groundwork to hold the Taliban accountable if they renege. So the international chorus on this is strong, and it will stay strong. We will hold the Taliban to their commitment on freedom of movement for foreign nationals, visa holders, at-risk Afghans. Fourth, Kingdom, France, Germany, Canada, Italy, Japan, as well as Qatar, Turkey, the European Union, and the Secretary General of NATO. We discussed how we will work together to facilitate safe travel out of Afghanistan, including by reopening Kabul's civilian airport as soon as possible. And we very much appreciate the efforts of Qatar and Turkey in particular to make this happen. This would enable a small number of daily charter flights, which is a key for anyone who wants to depart from Afghanistan moving forward. We're also working to identify ways to support Americans, legal permanent residents, and Afghans who have worked with us and who may choose to depart via overland routes. We have no illusion that any of this will be easy or rapid. This will be an entirely different phase from the evacuation that just concluded. It will take time to work through a new set of challenges, but we will stay at it. John Bass, our former ambassador to Afghanistan, who returned to Kabul 2 weeks ago to help lead our evacuation efforts at the airport, will spearhead our ongoing work across the State Department to help American citizens and permanent residents, citizens of allied nations, special immigrant visa applicants, and Afghans at high risk, if any of those people wish to depart Afghanistan. We're deeply grateful for all that John did in Kabul, for his continued commitment to this mission, as well as the extraordinary consular officers who were serving by his side. Fifth, we will stay focused on counterterrorism. The Taliban has made a commitment to prevent terrorist groups from using Afghanistan as a base for external operations that could threaten the United States or our allies, including al-Qaeda and the Taliban's sworn enemy, ISIS-K. Here, too, we will hold them accountable to that commitment. But while we have expectations of the Taliban, that doesn't mean we will rely on the Taliban. We'll remain vigilant in monitoring threats ourselves, and we'll maintain robust counterterrorism capabilities in the region to neutralize those threats if necessary, as we demonstrated in the past few days by striking ISIS facilitators and imminent threats in Afghanistan, and as we do in places around the world where we do not have military forces on the ground. Let me speak directly to our engagement with the Taliban across these and other issues. We engaged with the Taliban during the past few weeks to enable our evacuation operations. Going forward, any engagement with a Taliban-led government in Kabul will be driven by one thing only: our vital national interests. If we can work with a new Afghan government in a way that helps secure those interests, including the safe return of Mark Frerichs, a U.S. citizen who's been held hostage in the region since early last year, and in a way that brings greater stability to the country and region and protects the gains of the past 2 decades, we will do it. But we will not do it on the basis of trust or faith. Every step we take will be based not on what a Taliban-led government says, but what it does to live up to its commitments. The Taliban seeks international legitimacy and support. Our message is any legitimacy and any support will have to be earned. The Taliban can do that by meeting commitments and obligations on freedom of travel, respecting the basic rights of the Afghan people, including women and minorities, upholding its commitments on counterterrorism, not carrying out reprisal violence against those who choose to stay in Afghanistan, and forming an inclusive government that can meet the needs and reflect the aspirations of the Afghan people. Sixth, we will continue our humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. The conflict has taken a terrible toll on the Afghan people. Millions are internally displaced. Millions are facing hunger, even starvation. The COVID-19 pandemic has also hit Afghanistan hard. The United States will continue to support humanitarian aid to the Afghan people. Consistent with our sanctions on the Taliban, the aid will not flow through the government, but rather through independent organizations such as UN agencies and NGOs. And we expect that broad international diplomacy across all these issues and many others. We believe we can accomplish far more and exert far greater leverage when we work in coordination with our allies and partners. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had a series of intensive diplomatic engagements with allies and partners to plan and coordinate the way ahead in Afghanistan. I've met with the foreign ministers of NATO and the G7. I've spoken one-on-one with dozens of my counterparts. Last week, President Biden met with the leaders of the G7 countries, and Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman has been convening a group of 28 allies and partners from all regions of the world every other day. Going forward, we'll coordinate closely with countries in the region and around the world, as well as with leading international organizations, NGOs, and the private sector. Our allies and partners share our objectives and are committed to working with us. I'll have more to say on these matters in the coming days. The main point I want to drive home here today is that America's work in Afghanistan continues. We have a plan for what's next. We're putting it into action. This moment also demands reflection. The war in Afghanistan was a 20-year endeavor. We must learn its lessons and allow those lessons to shape how we think about fundamental questions of national security and foreign policy. We owe that to future diplomats, policymakers, military leaders, service members. We owe that to the American people. But as we do, we will remain relentlessly focused on today and on the future. We'll make sure we're finding every opportunity to make good on our commitment to the Afghan people, including by welcoming thousands of them into our communities, as the American people have done many times before, with generosity and grace throughout our history. In this way, we'll honor all those brave men and women from the United States and many other countries who risked or sacrificed their lives as part of this long mission right up to today. Thanks for listening.
Mr. Secretary, this administration break its word that no American would be left behind?
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You are watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. America's longest war now over. Every single U.S. service member is out of Afghanistan. What else the Pentagon is saying about their departure. Chicago students back at school today, but some of them had a hard time getting there. We'll show you why.
We're going to stand with you and the people of the Gulf as long as it takes for you to recover.
Tropical storm Ida barreling on, so where's she heading next? Plus, look at the mess she left in Louisiana as a Cat 4 hurricane and the latest on the rescue there. We start with the end of the withdrawal in Afghanistan. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece is here, along with NBC News global security reporter Dan DeLuce in Washington. Dan, first to you. CENTCOM Commander General Frank McKenzie announcing all U.S. troops are officially out of Afghanistan. What else did we learn from the Pentagon today?
That's right. It was a historic moment by any measure, the end of U.S. involvement after 20 years. The last C-17 took off at 3:29 Eastern Time. General McKenzie, the head of Central Command, told reporters that this was the end of the mission, the end of the evacuation, but he also said it came at a cost of more than 2,500 U.S. troops. Here's what the general had to say just now.
Tonight's withdrawal signifies both the end of the military component of the evacuation, but also the end of the nearly 20-year mission that began in Afghanistan shortly after September 11th, 2001. It's a mission that brought Osama bin Laden to a just end, along with many of his al-Qaeda co-conspirators. And it was not a cheap mission. The cost was 2,461 U.S. service members and civilians killed, and more than 20,000 who were injured. Sadly, that includes 13 U.S. service members who were killed last week by an ISIS-K suicide bomber.
So that is General McKenzie trying to sum up 20 years of war, and that is really over now for the U.S. military. That mission is over, and he talked about how it had succeeded in the killing of Osama bin Laden and a lot of al-Qaeda militants. But of course, the end was, by any measure, ugly. It was unpleasant. It was difficult, and there were 13 service members killed just in the final days there in the chaotic scenes at the airport.
All right, Shannon, how about the president? I know the White House called a photo lid earlier, which means we don't expect to see him again today. But have we heard anything additional, or do you expect to hear anything additional from the administration tonight?
Well, Press Secretary Jen Psaki had a briefing this afternoon. She said we could hear something from the president in the coming days. We did have an opportunity to hear from the president earlier today, but it was talking about the hurricane and storm response, and reporters were taken out of the room before there was an opportunity to ask questions. So no comments today at all from the president on Afghanistan. As you mentioned, we have been told not to expect any additional public appearances or events from the White House, so we could get some sort of written statement in the form of a press release or a tweet, perhaps. But of course, the president has come under enormous criticism in the past recent days, recent weeks, for how this war has ended, criticism from both Republicans and Democrats. So the White House really has been on the defense on this front. But Press Secretary Jen Psaki earlier today saying once again that the president has no regrets, no change of mind or opinion on his decision to pull troops out of Afghanistan.
Dan, ISIS-K claiming responsibility for the rocket attack at Kabul's airport today. What else can you tell us about what happened here? I know the Pentagon was saying earlier that they were concerned about those active threats continuing until U.S. troops were out, which we know has now happened. So I know they're not as concerned for U.S. military any longer, but certainly a scary day today, right up until the very end.
Try to go after ISIS-K to try to protect the troops that were still at the airport and the evacuation operation that was winding down. And it's clear that we're going to see more strikes in the future, even without troops there, either by drone or otherwise. And the White House and President Biden has made it pretty clear that they will continue to go after ISIS-K as need be and to seek some revenge for what happened last week when 13 service members were killed in that suicide bombing that ISIS-K claimed, and also to try to prevent further attacks. But it is interesting. The terrorist threat doesn't go away. The terrorist threat remains, even if al-Qaeda is not what it used to be.
Shannon, a quick question for you before we go about the president's update on Ida. You mentioned that he heard from FEMA, from state leaders in Louisiana. The president has declared a federal disaster in that state. What else is the White House doing to help the Gulf Coast?
Yeah, they said they're sending FEMA federal personnel down there. They're sending equipment, other forms of support. HHS is going down there to set up a medical facility. And the president, in his remarks earlier today, said the biggest challenge is going to be coordinating all the state, local, and federal response, and that he has put one of his top advisors, one of the close members of his inner circle, Cedric Richmond, in charge of coordinating that response from the White House. Richmond is a former congressman from Louisiana, so few know this area and the people and the dynamics of this region better than he does. The president essentially told governors, if you need something, call Cedric Richmond and he'll come to me and you'll get what you need.
All right. Shannon Pettypiece, Dan DeLuce, thank you both so much. Dan, you referred to this earlier, but today is a day that will certainly go in the history books. America's longest war now over. Thank you both so much. This is one of their American service members were killed in a suicide bomb attack there. All of them returned home to the U.S. yesterday with a dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base. For more on these American heroes, here's NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin.
Hey, Allison, this is the hometown of Sergeant Nicole G., just 23 years old. She was one of 2 female Marines to have died in the Kabul airport attack. We spoke to her father, who told us that he would like Nicole, as well as others, to be remembered as heroes.
She's my hero. She's a warrior.
A heartbreaking loss made even more poignant by the words and images she shared. I love my job, Sergeant Nicole G. wrote just days before the attack, under this now iconic photo of her cradling an Afghan baby.
And when people see that photo, they see compassion. Mm-hmm. As her father, what do you see?
Just my baby. Yeah, it's my baby.
Richard Herrera foresaw the photo on TV before the bombings. He'd been sharing it with friends and family, proud as only a father can be. Then he learned the devastating news.
It broke me for a while. It hit me hard.
G's father, just one of so many grieving. President Biden and the First Lady paid respects to the fallen at Dover Air Force Base over the weekend. The president meeting with families in mourning as their bodies were transported with military honors. While in cities and towns across the nation, tributes poured in for the deceased, including Marine Sergeant Yohani Rosario from Massachusetts.
We will always remember her as the hero that she is.
The town of Wentzville, Missouri, honoring Lance Corporal Jared Schmitz. Norco, California, remembering Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui.
We're a family, so our heart breaks. Sorry.
31-year-old Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover was a natural leader, said his father, respected by his fellow Marines.
And it's going to be hard to go on without him. But we know that he died doing exactly what he wanted to do. He went out his way.
22-year-old Navy Corpsman Maxton Soviak was just a kid, his older sister posted on Instagram, writing, "My beautiful, intelligent, beat to the sound of his own drum, annoying, charming baby brother was killed yesterday, helping to save lives." Most of the 13 were just kids, some just babies on 9/11, which led to the war in Afghanistan. Their deaths now punctuating its bitter end. The family and friends of the deceased say they are praying for the men and women still in Afghanistan. Tomorrow is the deadline for the withdrawal, and officials there say they are concerned about the possibility of more attacks.
It's time to check in with NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. She's following the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Maya, what you got?
Hey, Allison, let's start with the fire in the CALDOR fire threatening Lake Tahoe. CAL FIRE ordering mandatory evacuations around the Tahoe Basin, saying the fire's been more aggressive than anticipated. The 2-week-old wildfire is moving quickly with no signs of slowing. It's already burning through an area larger than Chicago. The European Union is taking the U.S. off its safe travel list due to the rise in COVID cases. It's recommending members reinstate restrictions on non-essential travel. Also off the list, Israel, Kosovo, Lebanon, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. Tours should expect a variation of rules across the EU since there's no general COVID-19 tourism policy, and each country can decide who they want to allow in. The man accused of killing 8 people at 2 Atlanta area massage parlors appearing briefly in court. Robert Arrett Lawn already pled guilty to 4 of those killings in Cherokee County. Now he faces more charges and a possible death sentence for the remaining 4. The Fulton County District Attorney is seeking the death penalty and a sentencing enhancement under Georgia's new hate crimes law. The judge set the hearing to continue next month. The U.S. Department of Education launching a civil rights investigation into 5 states prohibiting mask mandates. The Office for Civil Rights is exploring whether the bans discriminate against students with disabilities who could be at high risk of severe illness from COVID. If the investigations determine mandates discriminated against students, it could lead to a loss of federal funding. The man convicted of murdering Iowa student MOLLIE TIBBETTS is sentenced to life in prison without parole. It's the maximum penalty under the law. The 2018 case captured the nation's attention because of the suspect's status as an undocumented immigrant. Allison, a lot of people watching that one.
Yeah, for sure. Maya, thank you so much. Ida, one of the most powerful storms ever to hit Louisiana, and she isn't done just yet. The storm made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane with winds above 150 miles per hour, ripping up trees, flooding streets, knocking out power to 1 million people in the state, including the entire city of New Orleans. At least one person's died so far, but that number is expected to go up significantly in the next few days. Ida now making its way north and east. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman standing by with the latest storm track. MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi is in New Orleans. But we start with NBC News correspondent Ron Allen, who's in Jackson, Mississippi. So, Ron, it looks like you got the hood up and the rain is coming down. Tell us what the situation's like there right now.
Yeah, it's the soaking and drenching rain that's still falling. It's been falling all day. That's the biggest problem here in Mississippi. It's more rain than was expected as the storm slowly makes its way across the state, creeping along. It's just about parallel the center of the storm to us now in Jackson. We've not had the high winds that many feared, nor along the coast has there been the storm surge. So there is that good news. But across the state, there are power lines down, trees down, about 135,000 dwellings without power as of now. And that's a figure that could rise. There are also perhaps thousands of evacuees here from Louisiana here in Mississippi. Many of them that we've talked to have said that they are going to extend their stays or try to find other places to stay because they're being told it's not safe to come back home just yet, and it may not be for several days. Again, the biggest problem here is the rain that keeps falling, drenching, soaking, causing high water, flooding in some areas. And that's why officials are telling everyone now to just stay put, shelter in place, because this is not over just yet. Back to you.
So, Ron, you mentioned the concerns about flooding. The mayor of Jackson declaring a civil emergency. What does that mean exactly?
It basically means that things are uncertain. It basically means stay put.
Yeah.
It basically means that we still don't know exactly what's going on. Across this state, and certainly in this city, across the state, schools have been closed all day. Businesses are closed, although you can see there is some traffic out on the roadway. Officials would prefer that people not drive anywhere, but some are. Unclear where anybody is going at this point. That's what a civil emergency is, and that's going to be in place for some time because, again, the storm is moving so slowly, just creeping across this state, just dumping more and more rain than was expected. And the outcome of that is still unclear.
Ron, I understand you're near a hotel where people have been riding out the worst of the storm, or at least trying to. What have you heard from them?
Yeah, every car in this parking lot that you can see has Louisiana license plates on it. There are literally thousands of people, evacuees, who are staying in all these hotels here. They came here days ago, and now some think they may have to stay here for a few more days. Here's what one person that we spoke to had to say. Take a listen.
We can't get back. The roads are all closed. Water's over the interstate. We can't get back home.
That must be very worrying.
Yeah, it's very scary. And it costs a lot, you know, to have to extend the stay, but we have to.
So what do you think? Is it as bad as you thought? Is it better or worse? Or
it's worse. It's much worse.
It's much worse. She lives very close to New Orleans, and she's been trying to communicate with friends, relatives, neighbors who are still there. Of course, communications are next to impossible. It's been very difficult. Some people say that they were able to get an email or two. Phone calls are much more difficult because, and the power is out, we know, in New Orleans. So again, a lot of people are stuck here for some time. They're not going home anytime soon. Back to you, Alison.
We know how challenging the situation is there. Ron, thank you so much for overcoming the odds to bring us this live shot. We very much appreciate you. All right, we've got MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi live at the main power transmission station in New Orleans. So, Ali, we spoke to you last hour, and you're trying to get a better understanding of why there might not be so much going on there at the transmission station, getting a better understanding of how long this city could be out of power. What have you learned?
Well, I'm here at the Energy Power Station. This is the New Orleans Power Station. It has 8 transmission lines that go out of this station to substations. So the way power works in a city, that 130 volts goes out on each line. They go to a substation. Everybody's seen those in their neighborhoods or substations. The voltage gets brought down to about 13,000, 14,000 volts. It then goes to transformers in your neighborhood and gets converted to 120 volts in your house, or 220 for your washing machine, that sort of thing. So this is where it all comes from. All 8 lines out of this substation, out of this generating station, are down. One of the things I came out here to see is this a physical damage problem, or is it something else? There's no activity here, which leads me to believe there aren't crews here fixing things. So the issue is in transmission. Now, again, in modern electricity transmission, it tends to be done by control rooms, and it's all digital. So something else has happened here that's preventing electricity from getting anywhere, wherever it is in New Orleans. Now, there are 2 parts to this. Whatever's happened here in terms of stopping the energy generation, and then the more local problems where trees snapped and power lines got taken down. We talked to one person who said, look, we thought about Katrina as a water event mostly, and that was pretty dangerous. This time it wasn't the water, it was the wind. Listen to his description.
It was pretty intense. A lot of wicked winds. Luckily, no flooding. That's the main difference between this storm and Katrina. This was a lot of wind damage, and Katrina was more flood.
So that's our situation right now. We do not know when this power is going to come back on. It could be, they said, 7 to 10 days for most customers, which means some will get it earlier. Hospitals, police stations, critical infrastructure will get it earlier. Most people will get it in 7 to 10 days, which I think that means this station will be putting power out to most of New Orleans. And then hard-hit areas, people who have had localized damage, including lines to your house or lines in your neighborhood, that is going to take, they say, up to 3 weeks to get power. So not a great situation in this kind of heat, where it's about 88, 89 degrees right now, feels like 100.
Yeah, that is tough to deal with for 7 to 10 days. You can maybe get through it for 24, 48 hours, and then that really starts to get rough.
Yep.
Allie, we've been talking so much about the death toll. The mayor in New Orleans reporting at least 1 death. She says a driver drowned during the hurricane. What else do you know there? And what are you hearing from authorities about the potential for more fatalities? I imagine that could go up significantly as they do search and rescue in those kinds of efforts.
Yeah, 911 is down here like it is in a lot of places because of the lack of power. However, we didn't see levees overtopping. We didn't see the large-scale flooding that we saw in Katrina. What we did see, even as I drove here east of the city, south of Lake Pontchartrain, was road flooding. And as we drove through some of those roads that were flooding, I was thinking to myself, you know, that's the most dangerous part of this, right? These storms, more people perish that way in actually relatively low amounts of flooding than they do in major events that, where, flooding goes to the rooftop. So that is possible. I will say that we do not know from authorities, including the National Guard, who we've spoken to, we do not believe that there's a lot of rescue calls going out right now. They just haven't been receiving information that needs to happen. Outside of New Orleans, in the parishes to the west, we're seeing a lot more of that, where there's real flooding. There are people trapped, but not in New Orleans.
All right, Ali Velshi, doing the work it takes to get the answers. We very much appreciate you today and all the hard work you're doing in that heat. Thanks, friend.
Thanks, Elsa.
Justin Drake is a storm chaser and meteorologist documenting his experiences on the show Storm Riders. So, Justin, you've had a very different experience than most people dealing with Hurricane Ida. You were just in the eye. We've got a radar photo that shows where you were. What was that like?
Well, when it comes to being in the eye itself, of course, it's completely calm. And it was quite a task for us to be able to get into the eye. We originally started just east of Houma, and with the track of the hurricane, what it was, we had to do quite a bit of maneuvering to end up getting in the eye, which is always our ultimate goal, to measure just how low the pressure is, which is an indication of how strong the hurricane is itself. And as you can see there from the video, we did some traveling through the strongest part of the hurricane, which is the eye wall, and we experienced winds that were well over 100 miles per hour. And as you can see, the destruction that was going on because of that.
Yeah, what a difference between the eye and the eye wall there. My goodness, you're almost blown out of the street. Could you just talk to us? I know this is not your first hurricane, your first rodeo, if you will. How does Ida compare to other storms you've witnessed? Because we're talking so much about this is a record-setting storm for the folks in Louisiana. It's one of the worst they've seen. How does it compare to storms that you've been in?
Well, from a comparison standpoint, this was very much like another Cat 4 that had been in Irma, as well as Hurricane Harvey. Yep. Both of those hurricanes, they were rapidly intensifying, and particularly Harvey, right, it was making landfall. And the difference between a hurricane that's rapidly intensifying as opposed to one that's maintained its intensity and then started to weaken is you really get to feel the full wrath of the hurricane if it's intensifying as it makes landfall, because the winds are continuing to increase.
All right, I got to ask, I'm watching this video and seeing this stuff flying around and poles coming down and crashing into homes. And yet storm chasers always seem so, I don't want to say calm because you guys get excited about chasing a storm, but always so composed. You ever out there genuinely concerned that maybe you've just gotten a little too close and you could be in trouble?
Well, the big thing is when it comes to chasing hurricanes is you always have to come prepared for the worst. So we make sure that we always bring enough food in case we're trapped there for a week, bring enough water, have supplies, bring in tow ropes. We basically make sure we're prepared for anything. And it's funny you mentioned about being prepared for the worst, because I actually blew out a tire while we were chasing this hurricane and I got stuck in the mud for a second. So me and my partner, we had a tow rope to get my car out the mud. We, of course, had the spare tire to put on the car. So you just have to be mentally prepared for anything to happen and stay calm and collected during that process.
Do you ever actually get scared? I would be terrified.
You know, there's always some points in the chase where you're kind of thinking, oh man, this is going to get tricky here. It happens all the time. But the main thing is that you just have to stay calm and just think about what you can do to get out of that situation. Because as you know, once you start panicking, then that's when you start making bad decisions. But I'll be lying to you, especially when the tire went out. I mean, I got stuck in the mud right as the eye wall was starting to hit. So it was one of those situations where we got to hurry up and get this taken care of, where you just got to just get in that mind from, all right, let's get at the task at hand to get this taken care of without thinking in your mind and getting too scared and then starting to make bad decisions.
All right, so you are somewhat human. I just had to check. I would love to talk to you about what's ahead for people in other states, for folks in Alabama or in other places who are expecting Ida to show up now as a tropical storm. What would you tell them about the potential danger ahead if they're thinking, it's not a hurricane anymore, I don't need to be worried?
Well, once a hurricane's made landfall, in particular, when now you're starting to get days after that, the winds themselves start weakening. So it's not like those folks are going to have to expect the 120-mile-per-hour winds. But now the main danger becomes the flooding, which, of course, has been a main concern this whole time. So you're going to have a lot of rain. Also, in some of those outer bands, you're going to have a potential for tornadoes. So there's been tornado warnings going out throughout the day with some of those cells are on the outside edges of Ida. So it's very important for people to be able to take heed to any tornado warnings that might happen in the area, and also be very wary of flooding. We have a saying, turn around, don't drown. So if you come across a flooded roadway, please don't try to risk it, try to go across thinking you can make it. Just find an alternative route.
Turn around, don't drown. Advice from a storm chaser. Justin, thanks for being with us, and please stay safe out there.
All right, thank you. I will.
All right, NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman has been tracking Ida and where she's going next. So, Michelle, what's the latest today?
Well, the latest, well, first of all, that was so cool to listen to what his story is. Can you imagine being that?
Right?
That's like a true hero to me, right? I
No.
know. I like run in the rain.
I can't.
You know,
I could never do it.
Screaming, but
No,
I know, it's
I'd be
so
terrified.
cool. And he's
I'm
just
with you
so
there.
strong. He was born to do that. But I know, same. All right, let's talk about Ida, though, because the good news is it is officially not a tropical storm anymore. So a tropical depression, Ida, that's how we're going to refer to her now. And Ida's going to go down in the history books. It's probably going to be retired, definitely retired, never to be used again to name a storm. So let's talk about records, because it was catastrophic, so sad, and also history-making. So it was the 5th strongest landfall on the continental U.S. It tied with Hurricane Laura, which hit Cameron, Louisiana last year. So Louisiana becomes the first state with back-to-back 150-mile-per-hour hurricanes. And unfortunately, I think this is a sign of the times, and we will hear this in the future. So when we talked about Ida, it was a Category 2 storm, 8 o'clock on Saturday, and then it just exploded early Sunday morning into a Cat 4, a strong Cat 4. It got up to 155 miles. It was only 2 miles away from being a Cat 5. So we were watching that very, very closely, but it never quite made it. But look at some of these wind gusts. I mean, we saw that in Justin's video where those winds were just so strong. Port Fourchon, 172-mile-per-hour wind. Grand Isle, 146. And these are spots that are on a little fragile island, so just really scary times there. This is what we're looking at right now. We saw Ron's shot a little bit earlier in Mississippi, Jackson, and we are looking at rain. We're looking at heavy rain in a lot of spots. So even though the wind story of Ida is done, we are looking at the potential for flash flooding. And Allie sort of mentioned this too. I mean, flash flooding is really dangerous. It's life-threatening. It's fast, it's quick, it's powerful. So this story will not be over for at least 5 days. Where you see the yellows, the reds, the oranges in Alabama, Mississippi, down the panhandle of Florida, we're looking at some heavy rain and even looking at strong thunderstorms. We had a tornado watch, but that has since been lifted, but we still could see the chance of some tornadoes and even some severe weather. And that carries through as we go through the track here over the next several days. So here is the latest, finally downgraded from a tropical storm, 35 miles per hour, moving slow, still painfully slow at 9 miles per hour. Really didn't make much ground today. Still in the state of Mississippi. It will move later on tonight into Tennessee. And again, last weekend, we had 17 inches of rain in Tennessee. So it's traveling through a lot of spots that have seen a lot of rain. The grounds are very wet. We don't need any more rain in these spots, and we're going to get some. We're going to add to it. And we're going to see the chance for some severe weather as well. So let's take a look towards tomorrow. Ida's moisture is going to merge with the front. That's going to give it a little bit of power, a little oomph. And that's going to increase the chance for some flooding. And we could even see some strong storms as well. Then it moves into the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast on Wednesday. Heavy rain threat for the mid-Atlantic. We had Fred, we had Henri that moved through. So we do have some flash flood warnings, flash flood watches up. And this will continue over the next several days, Allison. So even though the wind story is done, even though Ida's not a tropical storm, it still is something to talk about over the next several days.
All right, Michelle, thanks so much for keeping an eye on Ida. I know it's still a concern for those folks where she is headed. So thank you very much for the latest.
Yeah, sure.
Joining me now, Derek Glover, Assistant Chief of the Central Fire Department in Baton Rouge Parish. Chief, thank you so much for being with us, especially on a day like this when I know you're so busy. The White House saying the Secretary of Homeland Security will be in Baton Rouge tomorrow to meet with the governor and to assess the damage. What is that damage looking like right now, and what kind of help do you need from both the state and the federal government?
We have seen extensive damage in our fire district. I've been on the fire department and went through Katrina, Gustav, and even Andrew. And in my fire service career, this is the most devastation that I've seen in our fire district. We're just outside the city limits of Baton Rouge to the northeast, have a district about 60 square miles. A lot of residents are asking for the FEMA tarps. We had a few left from previous hurricanes and have issued those, but are running out very, very quickly, and need to get those out to the community to give them some shelter on those damaged roofs.
I understand Ida knocked out a main transmission line there in Baton Rouge. We got hundreds of thousands of homes there with no power, and it could stay that way for weeks. What are you trying to do to help those folks in the meantime?
Yeah, we have a lot of residents that are on generator power right now, and through our social media, the State Fire Marshal, we're all promoting generator safety. After these hurricanes, we see a lot of improper generator placement too close to the home, in garages, and we have a lot of carbon monoxide issues. Just trying to keep everybody safe, get the message out there. You may be on generator for up to a week to 10 days is what they're telling us, and just proper ventilation and making sure that those generators are shut down for at least 20 minutes when they go to refuel them, so they don't have any fire or anything from the gas.
Speaking of fires, the mayor is concerned about the number of water main breaks there in Baton Rouge. How's that affecting your department? Do you have the water you need to put out potential fires?
We do here in Baton Rouge, south of our area. There has been some water pumps that have lost power and they're without power. Here, there's a private water company that operates East Baton Rouge Parish, and that private water company does have generators on all their pumps, and we are fine in East Baton Rouge Parish as far as water pressure from our fire hydrants.
Well, Chief, as I said at the beginning, I know you're incredibly busy right now working to help people as best as you can. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and for the work that you do for the people in Baton Rouge.
Thank you for having us.
Some sobering new numbers in the coronavirus pandemic. NBC News confirming the U.S. has surpassed 39 million confirmed COVID cases since the pandemic started. COVID has killed 643,774 people in this country so far. Hundreds of preschoolers across the country getting kicked out of school daily, according to the International Journal of Child Abuse and Neglect. But why? NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett explains.
Lance Bassiano's high energy applauded at Little League, but when it came time for him to go to preschool, that energy caused trouble.
It was 9 daycares in less than 2 years.
So this happened over and over and over again.
Over and over and over again. This has been such a journey. We were very embarrassed by it because we're thinking, what are we doing wrong as parents? You have a child that keeps getting expelled out of school. You don't know how to react to it or what you're supposed to change or do.
Daycare after daycare told the Bassianos that Lance could not come back, saying he was a lot to handle.
The sad thing is it affected him greatly because He felt unwanted.
It's more common than you might think. Nationwide, it's estimated that 250 children are suspended or expelled from preschool each school day, more than 65,000 every year, according to a study published in the International Journal of Child Abuse and Neglect.
When teachers were highly stressed, they were more likely to report expelling multiple kids. And also when teachers felt that they were unsupported in their work with parents, or when they had negative perceptions of parents, they tended to report expelling more kids. And so that really spoke to us about it being an adult issue. It's less about children's behavior and more about adults' perceptions of and responses to kids' behavior.
Preschool and early childcare is essential for young children. Their development and brain growth is the most dramatic during this time, learning foundational skills and building social relationships.
When we don't invest in children in these first 5 years, we're all going to have to pay for that later. Expulsions, especially in early childhood, are a symptom of a much larger problem, of a broken, underfunded, undervalued, fragmented childcare and early learning system in our country.
Illinois tried one solution, banning early childhood expulsions altogether, instead encouraging childcare centers to use local resources. It's one of 6 states and D.C. to pass legislation protecting children from expulsions in both public school and private childcare settings. In the last 7 years, more and more states are addressing the problem in some capacity. And it's helped. Before the law, nearly 13 out of every 1,000 children were expelled in Illinois. It's down to just over 3 out of every 1,000. But researchers found that twice as many children were informally pushed out, and the expulsions that did happen were disproportionately among boys and black children.
You have a little body with really big feelings, and they don't know what to do with them.
Lindsay Percival has run the Learning Bridge Early Learning Center in Evanston for 10 years. She points out that the new law is flawed.
The problem is that we have the mandate and we don't have any resources backing it up. Really, the only resource that doesn't cost a lot of money is going to somewhere like Action for Children and having one of their therapists come and help us. But they are only with us for about 6 weeks. And that's not enough time for them to build a relationship with the child, and it's not enough time for them to visit with the parents.
It's an emotional struggle plaguing young children, even pre-pandemic, adding to parents' anxieties as their kids go back to school this year. Smaller class sizes as a pandemic precaution actually helped, but only briefly. As kids are going back to school and daycares full-time this year, there are new challenges.
I really do worry about how the workforce shortage and program closures can increase either formal expulsions or just denial of care for kids and families.
What would you say to parents who are experiencing this who might feel like this is their fault?
The first thing is for parents to take a deep breath and recognize that some of this is very normal. 20% of kids are going to show challenging behavior at some point before kindergarten entry. It's a very developmentally typical experience. Children's challenging behavior should really be reframed as their attempts to communicate.
For Lance, this proved to be true. As he got older, he's having less issues at school.
You like school better than daycare?
Yes! While researchers point to the overall need for more funding and resources to solve this outright, in the meantime, they say the first step for parents and teachers is to act with empathy.